So this is what we call the graveyard slots, getting close to the end of the forum. People are getting tired, and I just realized that also you had your fika break cancelled because I think it was scheduled to be at 3. So in order to counteract all these negative measures, I've given this talk a very, very energetic title, Charging into the Future. And as you can guess from the title, this title is all about storage. Storage is kind of the holy grail of renewable energy generation. Holy grail as in really great, and maybe we'll never get it, who knows. I think, I'm hoping that it'll become clear after this talk that the answer is we are going to get it. But it's still worth asking the question, is storage important? Because storage is very expensive, and it hasn't been necessary up until now. And there are many people that just didn't think it was important. And I'd like to take a quote, for example, from the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, when they installed the new Tesla battery in South Australia.
By all means, have the world's biggest battery, have the world's biggest banana, have the world's biggest prawn.
So not everybody thought that that was going to be important. And so this is a whole forum about data. And so we've asked the question, is storage important? So let's now use data to answer that question. And to do that, I want to use a new product, a new service that we're going to be launching as a professional service called Greenbyte Potential. And in this simple example I'm going to present, we're going to take a wind farm, let's call it wind farm A, about 500 megawatts of production, peak production. But it could also be a photovoltaic site, solar site. And what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the available charging power. Now, by available charging power, what I mean is the instantaneous loss production owing to grid curtailment. So you've got wind, you want to produce power, but the grid doesn't need any more, and so you have to curtail. And what we do as part of this calculation, as part of this service, is we create a storage model, and that can be many different sorts of models, but for this example I'm showing here, it's a very, very simple model of a lithium-ion battery with a minimum maximum allowed level, which you can adjust depending on your requirements for longevity, and a max and charging and discharging rate. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that model and we're going to ask the question, how much extra energy could have been recovered and sold from wind farm A? Making very, very simplistic assumptions that you could, for example, the moment you've stopped being curtailed, sell all that energy back to the grid. These assumptions can be adjusted. Now, this is a very fast-moving movie, which is going to loop. So if you miss what's happening on it, it will go back again and start again. This is the simulation of that wind farm for 1 day. And it's a simulation where it's attached to a battery. This model is rated, the rated power of the battery is about half its capacity. So that means it takes 2 hours to charge or discharge. And I'm going to take you through the movie now one step at a time so you can watch this happening. This is 1 day, so you can see the time at the bottom. It's starting again. At the top, we have red for curtailed and green for not curtailed. So green is when you can start selling more power again. You can see the wind speed is it's blowing through most of the day. And then when it's curtailed, when it's red, we can see that there's available excess power. But when it's green, we can see that there's no available excess power because then that power could all be sold to the grid. When it is red, you can see that the battery charges because that power is being captured by the battery because otherwise it would have just had to have been curtailed. And then when it goes green, you can see the battery discharges and puts its power back on the grid. As I said, this is quite a simple model of how you would do this, but we have the ability to interchange models and to do more sophisticated calculations. So this is assuming we have a battery with 100 megawatt hours capacity. As I said, its rated power is 50 megawatts. And we can see that over the course of the day, we're first able to store some power and then we're able to discharge it, and that was 68 megawatts of electricity. So what we can do is we can run the same simulation for many different battery capacities. So on the left-hand, on the bottom axis here, you can see we have the storage capacity of the battery that we're modeling. And on the vertical axis here, we can see the extra power that we were able to deliver because we had that battery. And of course, if you have a very small battery, you can't store or deliver much more power. And as the size of the battery increases, and this is a logarithmic scale, so that's 1 megawatt hour, 10 megawatt hours, 100 megawatt hours, you can see the amount of electricity you can capture increases. And what's really interesting is this is a fairly big wind farm, 500 megawatts. And because there's a limited rate at which you can charge a battery of a given size, to capture all of the wind farm's excess power, you would actually need a 10 gigawatt hour battery. So that the graph only starts to tail off around here. But by this point, you've got a battery which is roughly equivalent to 2 nuclear power stations. And it's not really realistic. So we'll then go and gray out this area of the graph and finish it here, which is actually the 129 megawatt hours is currently the world's largest battery that the Australian Prime Minister compared to a prawn. And so we can. This is the physics. This is what power we could obtain. But then, of course, what you want to know is what actual revenue could we have got from that power. I'm just highlighting here the video that I showed in the slide before was for one battery capacity, 100 megawatt hours, and now we have the 68 megawatt hours of excess production you could have had. So we need to turn that extra power into revenue. So we're going to, I used the analysis by a company called Lazard, who's an investment analysis company in New York. And I took their estimates for levelized cost of storage, potential revenue from frequency stabilization, short-term operating reserve, which is peak power, and capacity day-ahead auction. This is based on the UK prices, because that's the data that they provided. It turns out that actually, at the current levelized cost of storage, you can't make money from ordinary capacity auctions, so that's not going to be appearing on this graph. But let's take the line that we had the previous graph, which was how much extra power you could get, and let's turn that into revenue. So here again, we have the capacity of the battery, and here on the side now, we have the estimated return in thousands of dollars a day. And the model that was used in Lazard assumes that you're going to have a mixture over the lifetime of the battery. You're going to have a mixture of using it as a frequency stabilization resource. And then when the battery becomes too old to do that, you will then can use the battery to act as a short-term operating reserve. So that's why you have that mixture of different revenue streams there. And next, of course, we have to subtract the cost. And these are levelized, right? So this is assuming a 20-year life of the battery. This is the average per day over the life of the battery. So then, of course, we have the revenue, the cost, and we can make an estimated levelized lifetime net daily return versus the size of battery. And so if we go back to the example we looked at before of a 100 megawatt battery, you can see that the extra revenue using Lazard's estimation is of the order of $29,000 a day for this wind farm, or about $10 million a year. And that seems like quite a significant revenue. If this was the way it is, why isn't everyone doing this? Surely this can't be real. Actually, this is a fairly simple calculation, but if you look at the the Hornsdale Power Reserve in South Australia, which is the 129 megawatt hour battery installed by Tesla, over the first year of their operation, they actually brought in an annualized revenue of, I think it was about $25 million. So this is actually a realistic number. So fantastic. So we've shown that it is important, I think. We've shown that storage is important. But then this conference is actually about data. And so if we believe that storage is going to be important, and I believe it is, I want to make the statement and show it to you that I believe that data is more important for storage than for anything else in the renewable energy business. And not to make things too simple, but for wind and solar, maximizing return is about maximizing power production given other constraints like costs and grid curtailment and so on. But for storage, maximizing revenue is more complicated because you have questions like, because now you're buying and selling. So when do you charge? When do you discharge? You need to know the energy prices. What charge level do you maintain? Because that has an effect on the efficiency and the lifetime of the battery. For example, are you getting the most efficiency? So efficiency in this case is defined as if you put 1 kilowatt hour in, do you get 1 kilowatt hour back out of your storage device? These are the issues you might have to use data for when you're producing electricity. But even before you choose to purchase a storage facility, there is also a lot of data-driven questions you need to answer. What kind of storage? And I'll get to that in a moment. How large in capacity and in peak power, because those are different. And the lifetime. What is the lifetime of the storage? And even more importantly, what is the end of life of the storage device? Am I going to be able to resell it, for example? So this is my hypothesis. This is my statement. Data is more important for storage than anything else. And so I'd like to go now and look at a few cases where I demonstrate the power of data in conjunction with storage. And the first question I want to consider is, what kind of storage should I install? And I think we all have lithium-ion batteries in all of our devices. They're in the news. They're in electric cars. And so we all think that we think of that as the first option. And they may end up being the best choice. But there are still issues with batteries which may become problems, like lifetime, lithium supply, and recycling. And there are many other proven technologies available out there that all have actual capacity stored in the world right now. So there's sodium sulfur, which is great for environment because the main electrolytes are, power sources are environmentally friendly. We have flywheels, which have a fantastic response time. They have an incredible lifetime in terms of the number of times you can discharge power from the flywheel. More than 900 megawatts capacity installed. These are 2016 numbers, so that's why I've put greater than in all of the slides. Compressed air, there's been a plant, I think, in Alabama for the last 25 years, delivering reliable stored electricity. Then there's power to gas, which I think will become more important in the future as well. And thermal storage. There's a company in Australia now where you can just buy a container, they ship it to you, it will deliver and store 1 megawatt of electricity. You can buy as many containers as you like. These are available right now. And last but not least, my favorite, which I'm calling block potential storage. And I get smiles from all of my colleagues when I tell them that I think this is really, really cool, because it looks so ridiculous. Basically, you build a giant Jenga tower of concrete blocks, and when there's electricity available, you lift blocks to the top of the tower, and then when you need electricity, you lower the blocks down, and you use those descending blocks to power a generator. And everybody thinks this is ridiculous, but I say, look, come on. It's got incredibly simple technology, just electric motors, winches, and generators, which are all technologies we've had since the late 1800s. And concrete blocks, they don't self-discharge. So if you have pumped hydropower, for example, the water boils away over time. If you have batteries, the electricity slowly leaks across them. If you have flywheels, they slow down. A concrete block on top of a tower just stays a concrete block on top of a tower. And even more importantly than this, what people don't realize is that this technology is, which is currently being installed by Tata Power in India, I should add, has actually been around for a very, very long time. Because many of you may know the legend of Sisyphus. And he was condemned through all eternity to push a rock up a hill and only to have it roll down again. What we don't realize is that actually this was a storage device for the gods. And that's how Zeus's lightning bolts were powered when the wind was not blowing. So, just a side note. You may also not want to go with just one type of storage technology. You might want a combination. Flywheels for fast response frequency stabilization, batteries for peak power, power to hydrogen for bulk long-term energy storage. So these are all questions that can be answered using data, and questions that we are very interested in helping you be able to answer. Another question so that's one data-driven question you could ask about storage. Another important one is, let's now suppose you have got a battery. What's happening in terms of battery lifetime? And this is an important question to answer because the the OEM in most countries is responsible for the safe disposal of the battery at the end of its life. And if you are the battery purchaser, in some countries you can actually share in this liability. In other countries, it can be effectively added to the cost because the OEM is including that in the cost of the battery. But actually, batteries don't have to just be recycled straight away. They can typically be sold on. And actually, batteries have a life cycle. And this is my drawing. All the rest of the drawings in this thing are Frederick's, and they're much better. But this one's mine, so I apologize. And so here's a nice factory where the battery is made, and here is shiny and new. And a typical life cycle might be the battery is used in an electric car, until it's got down to sort of 90, 80% of its original capacity, at which point it's no longer valid under the warranty of the car manufacturer, so they take it out. And then you could easily use that in a grid-based power supply station, a battery storage station. And that you might do until the battery lifetime has got down to about 20%. And then you might think, oh, that's useless. But actually, if you can still sell it to somebody maybe that's running a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply in the basement of a building. And only then does it need to be recycled. The key thing here is to sell it on, the state of the battery has to be known in very great detail. you need in order to you can estimate the expected remaining lifetime of a battery. But in order to be able to do that, you need to know a lot of data. You need to know the history of every single charge and discharge, any errors that occurred in any of the battery's components, and so on and so forth. So again, this is a classic example of how data is important for storage. And of course, the biggest question of all is storage return optimization. I've got a storage device, how can I optimize my return? And there are a lot of factors to consider. So you might be using the battery in several different ways. So you might have some part of the battery contracted for frequency response, some part of it contracted for peak power. Sometimes it's freak power. And you might be also capturing curtailed production. You might also be using it for arbitrage, so buying the electricity when it's cheap and selling it when it's more expensive. And that's then your business model. And then also you've got other questions like how much should I allocate to each component? When do I buy electricity and when do I sell for arbitrage? Is the round trip efficiency optimal? So that was what I was talking about. If you put a kilowatt in, you get a kilowatt out, because batteries are more efficient if you keep them around the 70% charge level than if you discharge them all the way to the bottom. And am I adequately costing the component lifetime and depreciation costs in my overall revenue stream? So all of this influences when you charge and when you discharge. And this is a very complicated, multidimensional optimization problem that can only really be answered using data. And so once again, we come back to this thing, the devil is in the data. And so I don't know how much time I have left, but I've got a couple of slides now. And I want to talk about Greenbyte's vision in terms of this, and the same in every sector. But basically, we have this lovely pyramid that Pramod showed in his previous talk. We want to, first of all, start by focusing on gathering the data and making it available. Use the data to deliver business improvements. That might be the battery lifetime, for example. And third, again, making it deliver in its own right. And now I'm going to sort of ask you to sort of imagine we're far in the future. I don't know how far exactly, and see join us in our vision of what things might look like. Now, as well as wind farms and solar farms, you also have perhaps batteries attached to both of these, and you'll be able to see the charge level and how much is currently being charged and discharged. And you'll also be able to interact with the batteries. And so you'll want to know the key statistics. You'll need to know the lifetime estimate of the battery, particularly when it comes to cost projections to the future. Batteries actually are broken down into modules, and you can actually interact with the individual modules to work out their health, and it may be possible in the future to replace individual modules, so you might want to schedule maintenance. You can adjust the usable capacity of the battery depending on your optimization of lifetime versus use of the battery. And then you might also have price points for buying and selling electricity. And this is the end of my talk. I want to leave you on this slide, imagining the future, and hand you back over to place.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.